Hack into the mainframe.
Oh, I see what he's doing.
Hack into the mainframe.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. Hello, and welcome back for another episode. I'm James Smith. I'm joined by Neil Brock.
Hello, Polly.
Beginning of line, who we call Nige, and James Eatock.
Hello.
Who we call Eatock. I feel like I always have to punctuate that second.
You didn't actually. Yeah, I don't think you actually said this is Off Radar.
Didn't I
think you just said hello, and you went, my name's James Smith.
Oh, okay. Well, I do. Yeah. Anyway, we're Off Radar. We're a podcast. Yeah. You've listened to us before, hopefully, and today we're talking about a film that came out in 1982 called Tron. This was directed. This was recommended by our listener called Andrew Gow, who is a friend of yours, Nige, called...
Yes, indeed. We call him Wiggs.
Wiggs. Love to know why.
Yeah. It's to do with, he was called Chief Wiggum, and it eventually ended up being Wiggs.
I see.
Oh, nice.
I like that.
So, yeah, this film was written and directed by Steven Lisberger, who, if you look at his body of work, is very bare. He's done this and Tron Legacy, and I hadn't heard of any other of his very limited films that he's made.
I remember Hot Pursuit, with John Cusack in the 80s.
Oh, really? I've not seen that.
I think I've seen Hot Pursuit.
Hot Pursuit. He did the screenplay of, and also directed.
Animal Olympics. Bloody hell, that used to be on the animated film. That used to be on every kind of Easter or Christmas in the 80s, Animal Olympics. Very bizarre film.
And then he's basically kind of lived off Tron. he's like a one-hit wonder in the film world by the look of it, which sounds really harsh. It stars Jeff Bridges, David Warner, and Cindy Morgan.
And don't forget Bernard Hughes, aka the worst thing about this town is all the goddamn vampires.
Okay.
He's also in the very enjoyable Lost Boys.
Oh, wow.
And he was also in Blossom, if you remember ever watching that as the grandpa.
I remember Blossom.
I remember that. Yeah, God. I don't remember him in Lost Boys, blimey. Yeah. To be honest, quite a few of the characters are unrecognisable in this film, and that's probably why. Had you guys seen it before we did it for the pod?
Yes, of course. I saw this way back when I was a wee nipper. I remember it just being on all the time when I was growing up. I think it was normally on ITV. I mean, it is a Disney movie, bizarrely enough. And it's one of their first kind of live action films, albeit there's obviously a lot of kind of animations in inverted commas and computer effects, which were obviously quite groundbreaking for the time. But yeah, I remember watching it when I was young, saw it a few times since. It's one I actually own on DVD.
Oh, wow.
And there was a sequel not that long ago. It's kind of been one of those cult films that's influenced a lot of people. I think Daft Punk were big fans and modelled a lot of their stuff based on that.
Yeah, and you can see it.
It's the sort of film that props up every now and again, albeit I would say it's not really shown that much on TV these days.
No.
Had you seen this one before, Eatock?
Yeah, I just saw it when I was probably in the 80s at some point. But yeah, I hadn't seen it since. I remember enjoying it in the 80s. But yeah, that was the last time I think I saw it. And then, it's one of those films that I understand its influence and everything, the kind of legacy around it.
Oh,
wait, wasn't the sequel
called? Yeah, it was called Tron Legacy.
I just suddenly realised when I said that, I was oh God. It was unintentional. But so I was looking forward to seeing it because as a fan of animation and effects and stuff like that, I thought, this is going to be really interesting to see, not necessarily how this holds up, because that was never what I was expecting from this movie, just how it looks, back then kind of thing. I know what films looked like in 82, so I was watching this with my 1982 brain engaged.
Fair enough. I had never seen this film. I'd never seen Tron, and I'd never seen Tron Legacy. I don't know really why. I think probably it's a bit of a childhood film for a lot of people by the sound of it, and one that I just never really saw. And it's not a film that I would kind of sort out to watch because I have no attachment to it. And I remember the sequel or whatever it is. Is it a sequel or remake?
Yeah.
It's
a sequel.
The sequel coming out, and the kind of visuals of it, like you say, have influenced so much. But never seen. So first time watch for me. And Nige, I asked you to give us a little bit of a rundown of the synopsis, which should be relatively easy, I think.
Yeah, let me just hop inside my computer and I'll do that for you now. So, really, it feels a bit like the future, 1982. I know you talk like saying things like that, but it's not. It's the present day, albeit we kind of start in a video game arcade. And for those of you who weren't around in the 1980s, the video games in those days were quite basic, very interesting, but had a huge kind of appeal for the young uns of those days because there's nothing else to do. And we're in a place called Flynn's because the main protagonist of this film is an ex-software developer, Kevin Flynn, who formerly worked for NCOM, a big sort of computer-based organisation.
Played by Jeff Bridges.
Played by Jeff Bridges. And it turns out that old Jeffy boy is trying to hack into their mainframe to get access to some video games he created that were unscrupulously stolen by the big bad man who runs NCOM.
The NCOM 511 computer, center of the most calculating intelligence on Earth. Within it, there exists an unknown civilization where man has never been. A startling new world where time and distance defy the laws of logic.
I still do not understand why you want to break into the system.
Because, man, somewhere in one of these memories is the evidence.
Kevin Flynn, computer genius, searching for answers inside the system.
Hey, it's the big master control program everybody's been talking about.
Stop! I'm warning you. I'm gonna have to put you on the game grid.
Propelled into the digital world of the computer itself.
Right there is why I have a problem with this movie. So, the straight from that, I'm not going to pull any punches. Straight from the beginning of this movie, there seems to be an inability to connect the real world with the video game world, we'll call it, or the computer. Let's call it computer world. But like one of the earliest scenes, as Nigel's mentioned, is Flynn trying to break in to the corporation's big computer, like the master computer, and he's just tapping on his keyboard, and we're seeing just text, just bits of text, because obviously this is the 1980s, and like 1982, it was, you either had text-based computers or video game machines. Even in the early 80s, it was rarely did the two kind of merge until like the mid 80s. But the problem I had with it is he's typing away, and then we're seeing ships and spaceships and people inside, humanoids inside what we assume are inside the computer. But he's reacting like he's seeing this stuff, and I'm thinking, is he seeing these things?
Well, he's written like programs, and the programs are basically represented by looking like the human versions of the people that have wrote them. So, Alan's
which is really
Tron,
weird.
Yeah,
which is
strange.
But the way I kept trying to make logic of that is this is still a Disney film, so they're trying to really tell the bloody obvious story of these are just visualizations of technically ones and zeros, because that's what computer code is.
Well, yeah, it's like trying to work your way through a maze of code to get to a point.
Yeah.
And obviously in the visualization,
in the game, it's
inside
playing a game, basically.
But I felt that right from the beginning that it just didn't quite match up. He was reacting, and I'm like, what? And then we get David Warner speaking to the master computer.
He's like Dillinger, isn't he?
Dillinger. So yeah, that's the character's name.
Yeah.
I thought that was those scenes were interesting, where David Warner, because that's the thing, you see him in the computer as what's his character's name? Dillinger's the character, but his avatar is
Sark,
or something like that.
Sark. So we see Sark talking to the master computer, and the master computer, like Nige said, is saying, "I will not." He's making its own decisions, like Nige says. It's artificial.
I think it's really basic. It's representing the good guys and the bad guys. If you're a bad guy in the real world, you're a bad guy in the virtual world. And yeah, Master Controller looks like some really freaky, like big. I swear it's been used in like loads of other things. I swear it was in Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
I was going to say the old floating head is almost like Zordon from Power Rangers. It's just like this floating head kind of thing.
Yeah, or Krang from Turtles. The brain. I get what you mean. Like, the story-wise in this, I was a bit lost at times of what was happening. Yeah. I think the thing is, like right at the beginning of this film, we get the real world. Like after the first initial bit, we get the real world. What it does quite nicely is, in the real world, you see all the reds and blues and greens in the real world, so you get that massive kind of hint that we're going to be going into this game. I think it's really interesting looking at this film now because of obviously the advancements in AI and Alexa, talking to the machine, and like, all of that stuff then was like unheard of. But now we talk to our machines just like they do in this film.
I think it's really inventive. Like the desk, for instance, that Dillinger talks to. Like when I was a kid, I really wanted that desk. The fact it could speak to you, and the fact it had the text coming up, and it was like this big hub of information. But yeah, like you say, now it's like you have a tiny little ball in the corner that's also a speaker, and that's essentially the same thing almost.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of forget that when you're watching this film, because it doesn't feel like futuristic or like high tech, because we're so used to it. But actually, 1982, like a lot of this kind of technology that is hinting that we might get, we didn't have. And the whole idea of AI becoming, I think they even say in the film, the computers might not feel and stuff like that, and it's a conversation even today in 2023 we're obviously having with AI in general. But yeah, like visually, like this film it's quite a spectacle. And obviously, like, Nige, you come from a video game kind of background, so like you must like enjoy that kind of aspect of it, and especially like the old school games that it's doing. It kind of invents like like the frisbee thing and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, like, and I know Etok loves his old school games as well. Like, I know every Christmas he spends a good week of playing all the classics, and it has definitely got that element of very kind of simplistic gameplay, but it was always that kind of gameplay over polygons, really. Like it was limited, but they did the best they could with it. And I think the bit that excites me the most is when they're actually inside the games, and you've got like the light cycle, or you've got as you mentioned, the frisbee throwing game, and that stuff. I remember when I was watching it as a kid was the most exciting stuff, and I like wish that I could have played those games. And even when he's flying, almost like the equivalent of a Space Invader, this kind of like big, almost like ship that's like a giant. It's really hard to describe, almost like a weird sort of half square type thing. And yeah, it's just, I think it really plays on like children's fantasies of that era of something they never really understood at that time. Like computers in the 80s were really unheard of. Not that many people had access to them, not many people understood them. And it was just kind of a way, after like the invention of Pong and games like that, of bringing that to the masses. Because I think for a long time, computer games were kind of seen like as quite stuffy and elitist, which is ostensibly what Dillinger's character is, when really you want it to be like the kids, or like Flynn, who's like, cool, you've got this edge, it's fun. And that's something that this film kind of tries to get across. Obviously, with Disney behind it, pushing it, they obviously spun out a game based on this.
I think
in the end was more successful than the film.
Oh, really?
So,
that's interesting.
Yeah, in terms of making money, absolutely.
Oh man, this isn't happening. It only thinks it's happening. Hey, there's been a mistake. I gotta see the guy in charge.
You will.
The most iconic thing about this film, which I feel I've seen even though I've not seen the film, is that kind of weird, the stripe.
Oh, the light cycle.
Oh, sorry, is that called the light cycle? Yeah. So when they go through the kind of the wall thing, and they kind of, that whole sequence was excellent. And obviously in the new Tron, which I've not seen, but you've seen how they've kind of like revamped that for the new one. But the neons and the colours in this film are so vivid. The reds and the blues and the greens. They're right from the off in the real world, but they translate into the game world, and even the characters have these kind of like glows to them, like the baddies, if you were red, very obvious, and the other characters have the more kind of bright thing. But I didn't really kind of understand what the point of it was when we were in this game. I kind of got a bit confused. They're just like,
well, that's another thing. Like, just going on to that point, Smith. It was weird in this film. I thought it was going to be as simple as baddies and goodies, but there seemed to be this weird thing where Sark, and the Master's computer, when you're boiling it down to what the film is trying to say initially, is that they're just all computer programs. So why is Sark getting these people, like
users,
these computer like account programs? It's just all these random. Imagine like a program that is here we go. An Excel spreadsheet is a file on your computer. In Tron, in this film, that is represented by a little man. So a little man is being taken by Sark and the Master of the Computer into their army of sorts, and it's like, right, we're going to train you to fight and stuff. But I just found myself kept asking, like, to what end, though? I don't understand. It's like, so we can all wear red? I don't know what the...
So are you saying that this film, which I agree with, by the way, it should have just been a real simplified goody v baddie Disney in that sense?
I almost... But that's... I mean, maybe that's...
It's like there should have been, like, maybe a virus in there that or something like that.
Well, I understood that there was a rebellion. I was going to say, Nigel, I understood that there was a rebellion of sorts trying to go on with the blue people, we'll call them, the goodies. And obviously, when Tron is inserted as a character by the user into the world as a virus, it's like everybody needs to get Tron to attack the master computer, which happens at the end of the movie. But again, it's that process of why they're going through this whole system of we need to... it's not even infiltrating, it's we need to be a part of this weird, almost like gladiatorial combat thing, but we're just going to rebel anyway. I didn't quite understand.
It was essentially like... The Master Controller is reaching out into all other different like programs and organizations. It mentions how it's hacked into the Pentagon, it's hacked into the Kremlin, for instance. And I think what it's trying to do is it's kind of absorbing all these different programs, and it either converts them, so takes over them, or it puts them in this like battle situation until they yield and get taken over. So that's that's why when they're sort of doing the initial training, Sark's character kind of says, "Oh, you believe in the users don't exist. It's all just, this is the only world, and the Master Controller is the ruler of that world." When obviously anyone who'd been there previously, like the older character, is kind of aware that there was always this back and forth with the users, which is something they've kind of shut down. So yeah, it's kind of, you're right that it tries to overcomplicate it, but essentially it is just the fact that Master Controller is trying to dominate everything, and anyone that resists him is in blue and is kind of in a situation where it's almost like the Great Escape. They're in jail, they're fighting for their lives, or it's more like the Running Man, I suppose, in the sense they're fighting for their escape until they get to a point when they can kind of take on the Master Controller. But one thing for me, again, it had been quite a few years since I'd watched this, I remember really vividly the light cycles, the discs, all that kind of stuff. And I thought that played a much more prominent part in this film. I thought it was like
small,
a good,
wasn't it?
like there was a lot more games, and those bits are really exciting. I was really shocked when after sort of 15 minutes of Flynn being in this like prison in this sort of arena, that they escape, and then it kind of changes the complexity of the film. And I think the film lags a little bit then. Because he's with another character called Ram, who sort of gets injured, and then all of a sudden that like his love interest or former love interest in the real world just sort of crops up.
So
it's like, well, why is she? And again, is it because she's made the laser? And it's all that's a little bit unclear.
And I guess as a kid, you're going to watch this film and just kind of look at all the bright, flashy stuff and not really know what's going on, and you just kind of go with the what it is. The one bit I love it when Jeff Bridges' character gets taken into the game, by the way, with the kind of zappy thing.
Oh, that's a brilliant piece of that, like animation or effects.
Because I thought it was just going to be a big like white flash or something, but he kind of gets digitally kind of goes.
He gets digitized.
Yeah. Like literally,
with like the old
pixel
school
by
printer
pixel
style though as well. Like like you said.
I've been hoping you'd send me somebody with a little bit of guts. What kind of program is he?
He's not any kind of program, Sark. He's a user.
A user?
That's right. He pushed me in the real world.
It's really well done. His character's quite a strange one in the film. I mean, obviously, I don't really know this character because he's in the real world for about 3 minutes, and then he's in the game. But he does have like a personality in this world, and he needs to have a personality, so you kind of differentiate him against.
Also,
machine.
He's the one. The bizarre thing is he's obviously the character that has knowledge of the outside world, because he says I'm a user, because everybody else that is there is like an avatar, like they're a representation of the user. He's the actual user who's been digitized into the game. But there are moments in the film where he has these like godlike abilities, where he takes over one of the baddies' shuttles and kind of reconstructs it and does all this stuff. And again, it's just like, well, I understand that he's a user, but if he's not on the outside inputting this code, but I guess that's the whole point, is that he has these godlike powers because he's a user within the game, so therefore within the world, so therefore he can do it. But I just felt that there was that disconnect throughout the movie. I mean, there's one scene towards the end where they're on this ship flying towards somewhere, and I genuinely watched it about 2 or 3 times. I had no clue what's going on. It's like there are 3
it's
main
Tron,
heroes.
the girl, and basically Flynn, isn't it?
Yeah. And they're on this ship, and then there's all this, and it's like, oh no, this is gonna, and all you're seeing is these, for 1982, very beautifully rendered, yet now very crude objects, kind of that took probably days, weeks, and months to render. And again, it's just not translating for me visually what it's trying to say. And I'm thinking, like, what's going on? And then they just say, like, because at this point in the film, they believe that like Tron died. It's like, what? He just went behind a wall or something. That's all I saw. So certain things like that just left me scratching my head and I get, you know, when this movie was made and everything, but I just feel that at times it was often trying to go for the spectacle rather than just tell the story.
definitely. And you know, this
sorry
no I 100% agree with you, because I didn't really follow the story of this film, and
it's a Disney film.
And that's the kind of ironic thing, isn't it? It's like, you know, if you make this film again now, the first thing is to have a very simple but structured story that you can relate to as a kid or as an adult, and I don't think this film does this whatsoever, in my opinion, and I've really struggled to follow it. I like set design and the levels and all of that are great, and it is quite mesmerizing watching this, because you do look at it and think, well, this was made in 1982, and
for 1982
it must have taken jaw-dropping to create.
So the computers at the time couldn't do animation in that way. The frames had to be produced one by one. So for example, some of the more complex ones, those kind of like solar sailors, so those kind of like big ships that fly across, each frame could take up to 6 hours to produce, so that's for one frame. And because there was no way to digitally print them actually onto film, they basically had to have a motion picture camera filming the computer screen to capture each individual frame and then put it together that way. And bear in mind, this film probably has somewhere between, a rough guess, like 10 to 20 minutes worth of this kind of stuff. And likewise, they weren't able to do the technology for shots to contain both live action and computer animation. So it was very often done with hand-drawn animation as well, and just like really strong editing. So as a technical marvel, this film it was clearly groundbreaking at the time, and there was nothing else like this around this period. And I think it kind of led the way into where we are now, like the whole kind of CGI aspect and things like that.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
And considering it was Disney as well, like there was a huge reluctance from inside Disney for a lot of the traditional animators to actually work on this film. And then, almost ironically, the sort of many years later, Disney canned all their traditional animators and said, we're going to be CGI only. And then it was only when John Lasseter came in and had a really prominent role in Disney that he brought back traditional animators. Now, John Lasseter's most famously known for obviously all the Pixar films, which again are kind of like CGI. So it was a really weird sort of turn of events that got from this film to essentially where they are today.
I think that I would say this, not in defense of this movie, quite the opposite. But we can look at this film and go, what a technical marvel, right? And I'm sure the film was promoted heavily as like, you will not believe the world you're about to enter. And so for us to criticize it now in 2023 and go, wow, it's just, there's no real the story's confusing, the visuals aren't that great. Compare that though to Superman, which came out 5 years earlier.
Yeah, so
78. And how well, not necessarily the effects of that movie, but how well the story of that movie and the heart of that movie holds up. I think that was one of our highest rated movies.
And I guess even the effects for the late 70s,
the effects at the time, like the whole, again, that film was promoted as you will believe a man can fly. It was like you will see Superman fly as you've never seen him before. And at the time that would have been spectacular. But even now you look back at it, it's like some of those effects are still pretty bloody good, and you can marvel at them like you can with Tron.
Oh, well, like Star Wars 77.
Of course. I'm missing the bloody obvious there. But yeah, it's that thing of, Star Wars, very simple story. Superman, very simple story. But stories with such heart and characters that you, all these years later, you look back and go like, those were fucking great movies. This film, I just don't. Whilst you can go great visuals, shame it doesn't have much of a story or great characters.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's very strange, this movie. I feel like the visuals are, it's like they're trying to be too clever at times. Like, look what we can do with computer. Because imagine, like, if you're given, you've got a budget and it's like, right, create what you want. So, okay, we need to represent this scene. I can imagine the script was quite loose in a way in terms of visuals. So they build these 3D ships, and like Nige says, it's a very complicated process just to get them to film, because they have to, like Nige says, have to shoot them. You've got these crazy mesmerizing scenes. Except for the light cycle scene, because they feel so removed from the story, there's no real drama connected to it. Like I said, with that ship where it's going across and the three heroes are on it and they're like, oh no, Tron died. I'm just like, I didn't understand anything visually what was going on in that scene. And I think it's because they're quite abstract in their presentation. So it's really, I found it really hard to connect throughout the movie with a lot of the visuals, except for probably the most celebrated scene, which is the light cycle scene. And I will always marvel at
it's a great scene.
The costumes. I really do love how they did the costumes, and that itself was a process. But I really do. I think the scenes with Sark and the Master Computer are my favourite visuals, because I could see all the work that got into those.
I really enjoyed the kind of electronic music and the sound effects that was all very nostalgic in the sense of all the bleep bloop bloop, like anyone who's played a computer game from that era, or even a video game from that era, or even just been around in the 80s, it had this weird kind of nostalgia about it.
There was I was going to say there was one shot I did clock, and I'm sure this would probably be in Nigel's trivia, so I'm already stepping on it. There's a scene where Sark's looking at a map, and there's a really prominent Pac-Man in the in the
yeah.
in the map. I was like, oh my god, it's Pac-Man. And I'm sure this might be a stretch, I might be mishearing this, but I'm sure they even play the Pac-Man die sound effect, which is that
so there's the image and the sound,
the sound, because I saw it, because it's not even subtle. It's like Pac-Man is right there in this space. I was like, is that Pac-Man?
Send out every game tank in the grid. Get them!
Well, there is also a bit of early trivia. There's also a scene where when the solar sailor's going across, if you look at the ground, there's a silhouette of Mickey Mouse that's made to look like part of the terrain as well. So
no way!
Quite large sort of Disney nod.
Oh, that's pretty cute.
Well. I think just before we move on to kind of Nigel's trivia, I think there is this kind of... I mean, this was supposed to be like a really big film for Disney. It was said they were doing a live animation film. They hadn't done many before. They put a lot of money kind of behind this. And really, it flopped compared to what they expected. And because of that, it actually put Disney off doing another live animation film for a long time. But this does have a really sort of strong cult appeal over the years. I think the soundtrack, the look, the feel... The story, I think, if you break it down nuts and bolts, it's perhaps, it is confusing, a bit bonkers. But if you just look at it at a very sort of basic level, which most kids did, like good versus bad, get to the bad guy, finish him off, away you go, then it's more acceptable. But I think, it's interesting to hear, especially your opinion, Smith, as someone who's kind of come into this for the first time.
Do you fancy sending us a film to review, or letting us know your thoughts on a film that we have discussed? All of your comments will be read out in our end of season leaderboard episode. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, message us on Facebook. All links and info in the description down below.
Do it! Do it!
So trivia, I did mention the film was a bit of a flop. Now, originally it was supposed to come out around Christmas time of 1982, but then they heard The Secret of Nymph was coming out in the summer, which is a film you might be, familiar with. So they rushed it into a summer release, being like, this is going to be a perfect battle. Little did they know, other films that came out at the same time included E.T. So straight away you're like, fuck. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan.
Oh, wow.
Blade Runner
as
well. So again, and think out what Blade Runner looks like in comparison to Tron. And Poltergeist as well. So they kind of screwed the pooch with their release times. And the film as well, another hard luck tale, was actually disqualified from an Academy Award nomination for special effects because the Academy at the time felt like the film was cheating by using computers.
That's so weird.
Yeah, so look how it did later, I think many years later, maybe like in the sort of late 90s or early noughties, got like an honorary technical Oscar.
Oh, that's so bizarre.
But at the time, it's like, no, you're not allowed to use computers, you bunch of
cheating. Now look at it, you get one if you don't.
Exactly. Yeah. Very, very true. And then the last bit of trivia, we mentioned those like sexy suits that they all wear that have the colours on. Apparently, Jeff Bridges had too much of a bulge in his crotch area for a kiddies' films, so he was forced to wear a dance belt to conceal it. So there you go.
Wow. I bet he made
the dude abides.
The dude abides. Can I do my own bit of trivia?
Yeah.
I know something. Yeah. David Warner, who plays Sark,
and Dillinger.
When he's having his conversations with the AI, the master computer, every once in a while, the master computer will like almost punish him and like make him go, in pain, in excruciating pain. You see him kind of lean back and like, yes, master, kind of thing. I know this for a fact because I've heard from the voice actor. How's the best way? So there's a character. There's a character in the Transformers cartoon back in the day called Shockwave, who was this giant purple gun who was really cool, who always existed on Cybertron. And Shockwave spoke with this really unique, almost British voice, but strained British voice. And the voice actor was this guy called Corey Burton. And Corey Burton voiced other characters in the show, like Bumblebee and Spike. But he also voiced Shockwave. And the way he got to Shockwave's voice was he basically based the voice on those moments of David Warner in pain as Sark. So when David Warner's going, yes, master. And you listen to Shockwave in Transformers. Shockwave speaks like, yes, Megatron.
And that's what it's
like,
based
that's so
on.
weird.
That's such a weird.
Yeah, it's great because you listen to Shockwave and it's like, that's such a cool voice. And then you go back and listen to David Warner in Pain, and you're like, oh, that is where he got the voice. Yeah, he said he was just watching Tron. He needed a voice for the character, and he was just like, I'm going to use that.
Well, bizarrely as well, David Warner voiced the master sort of computer, and they just sort of did all sorts of crazy effects to it
process
to make it sound
yeah.
different. So there you go, good old David Warner influence.
And David Warner actually did a lot of, I think, voice acting in cartoons in the 90s. Maybe I'm sure he did quite a few things. I seem to remember hearing his voice on a lot of things.
Well, he memorably played evil in Time Bandits as well. So I think he very much had the bad guy sort of acting roles tied up.
Yeah.
So.
But there we go. Nigel Talks trivia.
There we go.
Very good. Okay,
yeah.
So what do we think?
Wiggs, your mega
Andrew
review.
Gow, Wiggs. Now, I
yeah.
really like this because it's like a novel, but I'm going to read it. So Andrew Gow has written, this film literally blew my mind when I first saw it. Before I even watched the film as a young boy, I had read the read-along book with the cassette, which I played through my Fisher-Price 2-tone plastic tape player. I was mesmerised from the start. From the glowing Encon chopper and Dillinger's space-age digital desk, I was hooked. Seeing Flynn at the arcade almost being lauded as a hero for playing video games seemed so cool. Once Flynn is shot with a laser and begins his journey into the world, I don't think I blinked. Everything I saw was visually blew me away as a young kid. Everything just seemed so cool. The glowing suits, the sounds. It was like nothing I'd seen before. The recognizers looked so good. Bearing in mind that this was the early 80s, my younger brother even had a Tommytronic 3D handheld game called Sky Attack.
Oh, yeah, I know the one he's talking about.
Where you could shoot down the recognizers with the tanks from the film. Google them, they're awesome. Then there is the light cycles. I still want one to the day. The look, the sound, everything about it was amazing. When I finally turned 16, I bought a Ferrari red Italian Vespa moped, taught around at a neck-breaking 28 miles per hour, making stupid sound effects from Tron, pretended that I'd finally got to my dream light cycle.
This is honestly reading like someone's biography. Yeah, and chapter two.
When I was 17.
This is so good. I mean,
the moped.
I was addicted to the film. I loved the game scenes, the fights. I mean, who wouldn't want to kill a frisbee? And also thought it was fairly brutal for a Disney film. When watching it back, I can't help but smile all the way through. I know it's old now, but with today's technology and visuals, you just have to take this for granted these days. But at the time, for me at least, it was groundbreaking viewing. There's some great scenes. Love Bridges adding cheeky smiles as well as the cocky swagger. In the kid in the arcade, yeah, I'm just saying. No, just got to continue reading. Just scrolling. The kid in the arcade wearing a full tennis outfit still makes me belly laugh. And when Sark is being hunted down, the escape riders on the map, I'm almost certain Pac-Man makes an appearance. Yes, it's cheesy in places and has extra cheesy ending that this film stayed with me for a long time. You guys often talk about nostalgia when it comes to films on the pod. When you first saw a film, or maybe how it made you feel when you saw it. I just love the fact that it takes me straight to being a kid and the memories just seeing it for the first time. Even today, when I've had enough of someone talking rubbish, I still say end of line. So, my score, it gets a solid 8.5 from me. I know you could probably pull the story apart and laugh at some of the comical moments, but this film changed the way I looked at films altogether. And then he said, really kindly, big shout out to the three of you. I really enjoy the pod. Keep it up. End of line. Andrew Gow, aka Wiggs.
that was a great.
It was brilliant. And
thank
you so much for taking the time for suggesting this, Andrew, but also writing that because, it was brilliantly well written, better than what I could have said about this film. So yeah,
as we will find out. Yeah.
What do we think? Nige, kick us off.
Yeah, so for me, there definitely is that nostalgia. There definitely is that feeling of watching it at a young age and having my mind blown, although not literally, coming out my ears. Like, it really, I agree, especially about Jeff Bridges' character. I know you guys have said, like, the character development isn't that strong, but you definitely get that sense of cockiness, the arrogance, the intelligence, all that kind of stuff. I think it works really well. I think as I got older, the kind of silliness of the story and like the cheesy bits, it hasn't aged fantastically well. I think that's very clear to see. But there's still absolutely fantastic moments. As we mentioned, the light cycles are just unbelievably good. So, yeah, I think despite some of the criticisms, despite some of the aging problems with this, it's still a solid film for me. And I think it's a sort of film that, to kind of understand that era of filmmaking, of how the world was changing, it deserves an okay rating. And I think the worst thing for me as well was like the ending so unbelievably abrupt in the real world. You kind of go from this situation whereby they obviously just defeat the bad guys, and he gets a printout basically saying, "Oh yeah, you did invent all these computer games." And then like a chopper flies in, and I have to agree with Wiggs as well. The chopper's really cool in the dark, but in the daytime, and this is the only time you see light. The whole film is either at night or obviously black inside the game world. It's only when they're defeated that suddenly the sun's shining, although it's not. It's like a really cloudy day. It's really weird. But anyway, and then he lands in a helicopter, and it turns out like he's wearing a power suit, and now he's the new CEO of the company, which is just a bit like, what the fuck's going on? And then the credits play, and really cool music plays, so it's probably for the best. But anyway, for the music, for the style, for the cult factor, for the nostalgia, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Nice, solid. Etok, what?
This is one of those I just really wanted to give it a high rating because of what Nigel said, because of what it almost represents. It was game changing, both on screen special effects and in the video game world as well. There's no doubt that so much of the video game world was influenced by this game as well. It pushed like technology that probably helped so many things down the line where we are now. I guess a lot of filmmaking and video gaming and influencing creatively owes a lot to this movie, but it still doesn't stop the movie from being a bit lacking. And it is the story, it is that disconnect, I think, where I really wanted the light cycles or the spaceships or this, that and the other to really feel like they were connecting to the story being told. Like I said before, and it is overanalyzing it, of course it is, but it is ones and zeros, and it is people sat in front of computers until obviously Flynn is digitized into the world. But I just couldn't get past the lack of it. Just seemed a bit all over the place. If this film didn't have all the effects, and like bear in mind, like I've always loved the effects of this movie. Like I say, yes, they're dated now, but I still love them because they are a snapshot in time of what could be achieved. But I just thought the film was a bit of a confusing mess. So I really want to give it a high rating, but I'm not, because I didn't really enjoy it. I probably would never ever watch it again. Kind of put me off watching Tron Legacy, which I'd be interested to hear people's opinions of that movie, but I'm like, I don't care to find out more about this. So I'm going to give it a because of the visuals and because we do like a bit of the dude. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. I think.
Yeah, fair enough. This was an interesting one. Like before going into this, it's just one that's not been on my radar ever.
Off radar.
See what we did there? On brand.
And I totally understand why people will watch this from a nostalgic point of view and enjoy it, like Andrew clearly really does, and Nige to a certain extent. I agree. I think visually, like, it is kind of mesmerizing, and I did kind of enjoy that aspect of it. But, and there is a heavy but, like, the root of every good film for me is story, and I feel this just doesn't have a very good story. I feel the real world is so minimal in this. I don't have any time to get to know the characters, so I don't really care who dies. I don't really know why they're in the game. I'm just confused in this film. So I kind of appreciate what you might get from it, but I feel like this could have been so much better had it just been a real simple good versus bad with some nice lovable Disney-ness in it. But it doesn't really feel that Disney-ish to me. I feel like the editing is really bad at times. Like often in editing you kind of overlap dialogue so that it feels like a conversation. And I know that these people are not meant to be people, but even in the real world, it feels like the editing's like just not done well. So I feel like it's ironically disconnected from reality, this film, and I just didn't enjoy it. I was quite bored, and I wanted it to end, and that sounds really bad, but I kind of mentally checked out of this film about halfway through, and I didn't kind of continue to try and figure out what was going on, and that's quite unlike me. So maybe I wasn't in the mood for it, but yeah, I just feel like this film's not aged well. So for me, I'm gonna stick with what I wrote, and I'm going to agree with Etok. I'm going to go for a 4. I think it deserves recognition for what it's achieved and the points. Yeah. However, I just didn't really connect with this film, I'm afraid.
Nice, fair enough. One thing I didn't mention is it did get nominated for Oscars for Best Costume Design and Best Sound, even though it didn't get Best Visual Effects. And do you know who was linked with the role of Flynn before it actually went to Jeff Bridges? Something I should have mentioned in my trivia. That man who comes up seemingly for every single, like, oh, do you know who could have played this role? Robin Williams, again. Which I don't even know what this film would have been like with Robin Williams.
I mean, I can't imagine that. But yeah.
That'd have been surreal. Even more
surreal. What do you think of Tron? Is it a nostalgic film for you, or is it a confusing mess?
Is it a film of nostalgic wonderment, or is it a modern mess?
End of line.
Game over.
We need your help. We are looking to grow Off Radar and release more and more high quality content. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pod. And why not share with your friends and loved ones?
Help me help you.